So I do want to go ahead and play this video here. This is something that's going on in Tennessee, talking all about centralized digital currency. So let me just make sure I've got the sound up for this, and hopefully you guys can hear it.
Close. Um, it is the Money Transmission Modernization Act. It's being pushed by the Conference of State Bank Supervisors, the CSBS. And, this is, again, it's hard for me to say. I'm not saying this is necessarily nefarious intent. This is a 501c3 organization, and they are involved in licensing mortgage transactions across the country. If you've ever seen that NLMS license number, whenever you deal with a mortgage broker, they all got to have that license number. That partially runs through the CSBS. They set that system up, so we're already sort of utilizing some of this, right? Nonetheless, there is they proposed this bill back in 2021 to modernize the way we transact, and wouldn't you know it, that bill is right here in Tennessee now in 2023, and I'm just finding this today. It's already passed the Senate. So the Money Transition Modernization Act has already passed the Senate here in Tennessee. It's already passed, let's look at the House side. It has already passed the Commerce Committee. It's already passed the Government Operations Committee. It is now on to Finance, Ways, and Means. And if it passes Finance, Ways, and Means, it will be on its way to the House floor and on its way to the governor's desk. And what are some things that you and I may want to be concerned about in this 60-page bill in modernizing our money transactions? Well, I got to tell you, there's one glaring thing that I'm concerned about, and it's this definition of money. Now, it's not as if this is new, because when you read this, you can think, well, yeah, there is the euro, out there across the pond. But look at this definition here of money. Includes a monetary unit of account established by an intergovernmental organization or by an agreement between two or more governments. And so we're not talking about someone else's. For example, money, the original definition, money means a medium of exchange that is authorized or adopted by the United States or issued by a foreign government. So it's one thing to have our national currency and then through an exchange process accept a foreign currency, right? But that's not what the second part of this definition says. We're not talking about foreign currency. We're talking about a new currency, an international currency, an intergovernmental currency, right? Agreed upon by two or more governments that actually becomes a legitimate currency. Okay, so that's different. That's a whole new type of New World Order currency. And we're about to add that definition, okay, as to what money is in the state of Tennessee. And that doesn't mean that right now we're coming under the New World Order and the central bank. But nonetheless, I just want to point out that these bills that are running through our legislature right now, in my humble opinion, are beginning to set the table of what we've all been talking about. A one world government, a structure where we all have the same currency and we come under the auspices of the central bank. We lose our autonomy, all of it. And it's not that we shouldn't be taking a look at these regulations. It's that a lot of folks are saying, let's just slow down a little bit and talk about this before we just send all these things to the governor's desk and open Tennessee up. Like I said earlier, we'll be the test case. We'll be the guinea pigs. When that digital money comes out, boy, Tennessee will be ready to go. Bring on the digital currency. No!
Gentlemen, your initial thoughts.
Birch Gold, guys, 989898. Text Bryce, BRYCE. That's another one of my sponsors. No, I'm well, it is one of my sponsors, but I'm teasing. Listen, when you start to see this all in the big picture, right? It sounds very conspiratorial, this one world government thing, but I think people are starting to wake up and understand how much all of this is connected. All of this is really manifestations of this goal of a new world order or a global regime controlling everything. And the terrifying thing about that is your money will no longer be your money.
It mostly already isn't.
True.
Like, very few of us have autonomy in finances. People are living in debt, and that's been the case for generations already. But now that will not only become the norm, but it'll become the only option, where you have to use this potential centralized banking. Now, what I think is interesting about that video, he says we are seeing the beginning of this. Well, I disagree. We saw the beginning of it 40, 50, 60 years ago. We are seeing the progression, the evolution of this thing that is going to slowly and surely walk us toward the so-called one world government or economic system. We're getting to a place already. We talked earlier about social credit scores, and who was it in the chat? I think Larry mentioned that because you don't have money, your poor ESG score won't allow you to be lent money. Well, we already have credit scores. Our credit score is ridiculous because even in the current system that I've never known a separate system that in my life, my ability to be successful with finances is largely perceived as my ability to borrow money effectively, not my ability to produce value or my ability to retain value in a monetary sense. I think we've had a broken, messed up economic system for a long time when it comes to imaginary money. And now we're at the point where if I want to take out a mortgage, I have to prove to the bank that I'm able to manage imaginary money better than you would think I can otherwise, rather than taking a look at my actual money. And this just gets into a whole Dave Ramsey rant in itself. Yeah. But this is the next step in the evolution of that, isn't it? And every step away from having ownership over anything or taking pride in anything is just another step towards, I don't own anything, but I'm happy about it because I don't really care as long as I get what I want. And maybe all I want is Netflix and comfortable clothes and a chair to sit in. And maybe all I want is to look like the fat, flubby people in WALL-E,
Yeah.
It's funny to think of that as our sci-fi future, but we can look at the extremes. But if you look through a microscope like we are in this conversation at some of these small baby steps that are stepping us one inch at a time towards something that's a lot nastier than we'd like to believe.
Yeah. Charles Cook jumped in the chat. He said, it's happening because everyone cares about Washington and watches Fox News and do not have a clue what's going on in their own state. I completely agree. And that being said, I should shout out that video came from Gary Humble of Tennessee Stands. I should make sure that I do that because they are doing some great work. So if you are interested in learning more about what's happening in Tennessee, go to Tennessee Stands to follow everything that Gary is doing. And then Zach said, your money will never be your own as long as the Federal Reserve and centralized banking exists. To which Charles replied, what I'm going to say too, which is end the Fed.
Yeah.
But yeah. Michael, you're right. It comes down to personal responsibility because, kind of what Zach and Charles were saying, the Federal Reserve is a giant issue. We don't have a lot of control of so many things in our currency. But that is where we do have to take control of the things that we can take control of. And Dave Ramsey is a great resource for that. Just some basic biblical truths of handling money. But Bryce, you were going to say something, so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was going to say is, we have forever, in this country, well, not forever. We have for many, many years had a semblance of liberty. But we were, many of us anyway, and I know you guys were, kind of all red pilled during the lockdowns when you realize that, oh, okay, we weren't as free a nation as we thought we were, and we
Right.
lost that freedom little bit by little bit by little bit, going back decades. And of course, they told us they were going to do this. That's the irony, is if you paid attention, all of what's going on right now was foretold by them in their own writings. And by them, I mean these, elite oligarchy type globalist folks that wanted to see us go down a certain path. And we were busy as, wonderful people, building our businesses, doing our thing, having our kids, keeping our heads in the sand. You mentioned earlier about church and politics, and the truth is politics, the definition of it is how we organize ourselves. And the churches that decided that they weren't going to be involved in how we organized ourselves are directly responsible for a lot of what's coming soon.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of what this podcast is focused on. We do a weekly show, and sometimes it's hard to know which topics to pick because so much happens in a week in the news cycle. And it's always a struggle to figure out, do we focus on something that's theological or something that's political? And sometimes the answer is yes to both. And sometimes it's just one or the other that we have to discuss as Christians so that we can be aware of what's happening in our culture and have these discussions, because unfortunately they are not happening among churched individuals in this country very often.